Now, in focus, KTTH Seattle radio talk show host Jason Rantz. Jason, always great to see you, my friend. I want to start with this. Business Insider has done a report on this particular liberal DA, and I want to start with him asking for the public's help, which is a bit rich because since taking office, he's been called a committed reformer. He slashed probation sentences, ended the prosecution of sex workers and cannabis offenses. Cannabis is legal in a lot of places, and aggressively pursued cases against police officers accused of misconduct. He's used words like dirty cops in his rhetoric. His conviction integrity unit, Jason, has exonerated about 24 people his predecessors had convicted. It's a proverbial round door. Just go right through it. You can come back out on the other side, revolving.
I think very clearly in what we've seen, I remember last year, and we were talking about this with Larry Krasner, saying that there was no crime surge happening in Philadelphia or even across the country. And what we were told at the time was, oh, COVID was somehow to blame, not guns. And now we're back to the guns talking point. But what's clear to me is that when you have over and over and over again, these cities experiencing the crime surge, whether it's Philadelphia, New York, Seattle, Portland, when you look at what everything has in common, it's not just the guns. It's the policies. It's the policies that say we're not going to actually punish criminals. We're not going to keep them in jail. When we see such a rise, in particular, violent crime coming from gang members, these are the younger people who are clearly violent, who are not going to be reformed, who are not being taken seriously as the threats that they are. So instead, we put them into restorative justice programs, which is just summer camp or music therapy. That doesn't actually work, and they don't take it seriously. And so we constantly see these policies putting the bad guys back out on the streets, and then we're shocked, or he pretends to be shocked at the level of crime that's happening. Why would you be shocked if you're the one who's responsible? And we can tie it directly to you.
You know, one thing that law enforcement are telling me behind the scenes as they learn more about criminals in these big cities like Philadelphia when they commit these crimes, once they're let out, they reconnect so easily. And this typically happens among the younger criminals. So now you have 10 and 13, 15 people showing up. You know, one of them had 13 shooters, known gunmen, at one scene.
Yeah, it's really easy to reconnect because usually, especially when we're talking about gang violence, they look at this and this is how you develop your street cred. You're able to go out there and commit these violent acts and you're seen as cool because you were able to do that. And it's even better for them because they know they're not going to be any consequences. They'll likely get a prosecutor or a DA who's going to go really, really easy on them because of perhaps the color of their skin, perhaps their age, perhaps their gender, whatever it happens to be. They know that they're going to get off. And so you're just going to see more and more and more of this. And to be clear, had Uvalde, Texas not happened, this conversation right now, outside of Fox News, because we talk about this every single week, but these mass shootings would not be covered. What happens in Chicago never gets covered. What happens in Philadelphia never gets covered by the national media because they can't politicize it to go after guns. But we are having zero conversation, certainly a meaningful conversation outside of ours and on Fox News on gang violence, families being torn apart. It's pretty obvious that it's political.
And we often say the names of victims rather than those who were perpetrating these crimes unless there's a manhunt. At least I can speak for this show in terms of that, because I think it's really important to focus on the human beings who are suffering. Yeah. But I do want to get to this because I thought it was interesting. You brought up, you know, what happened in Uvalde. I'll be real quick about this. So there's that bipartisan talk on the Hill right now going on. And senators on both sides of the political aisle don't want President Biden weighing in, don't want him involved in any kind of gun bill negotiations. Let's watch.
I think the Senate needs to do this ourselves. I've talked to the White House every single day since these negotiations began, but right now the Senate needs to handle these negotiations.
The president might have been a president who would reach across the aisle, try to bring people together, but he's chosen not to take that approach since day one. He has sided with the far left of his party and really not reached out to Republicans.
When no one wants you at the table. My goodness, it sounds like certain people in Europe who don't take our calls. Anyway, real quickly, Jason, your response.
Yeah, he's so far to the left on this. He knows that he's out of touch with most Americans, and he's ignoring, like he usually does, the root causes. So I'm glad that there's a bipartisan group of lawmakers who, if there are ways that we can ensure that guns don't get in the hands of the people that all of us agree shouldn't have it, well, let's go ahead and do that. But I do push back a little bit at this notion that whenever there's a tragedy, well, we need more laws. Well, are the laws that are on the books right now being enforced? And can you truly come up with another law that's not unconstitutional?
Well, none of it's going to be unilateral anyway. All right, let's get to this, because we want to focus on what can be done and whether or not liberal DAs are willing to do those things to keep us safe. A horrific hit and run is now getting a lot of fresh attention. Liberal Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon forced to walk back what he said earlier. He now says the LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva did not agree to lenient charges for a teenager who mowed down a mom and her baby last summer. The little one was in a stroller, the mom shielding the baby. The baby was okay. The video is shocking and disturbing. Gascon's sentence put the teenager driving the car here, look at this. By the grace of God, is she alive? Still fighting for her little one. Look at that. Gascon's sentence for that teenage driver to go to camp for juvenile offenders for 5 to 7 months. You see the car barreling again from a different angle. The woman and her child knocked over. That stroller, everybody off their feet. Villanueva said he was never consulted about this case. Here's what he tweeted. Sheriff's investigators would never be okay with the lightweight sentencing in this hit and run case. Stop empowering and encouraging criminal behavior. Hold them accountable. Hashtag victims matter. Meanwhile, that mom is going after the DA. George Gascon doesn't value my life or the life of my child. Why are Gascon's policies prioritizing the livelihood of rotten monsters when my child is essentially being told his life doesn't matter? Jason Rantz.
We hear that over and over and over again. More people are waking up to the reality of what these policies have been doing to them and their community, their friends, their family members, and they're sick of it. We look tomorrow at the recall election for Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, same exact issue. Over and over and over again, these DAs are pretending that the criminals are the victims. And in this case, we learned that the kid, the teenager who was the driver, the monster, was already on probation. So at what point do we step back and say, I'm okay with giving second chances and even third chances in certain circumstances? When a kid steals from a 7-Eleven, I'm not going to throw that kid in jail, and I don't think that that's the right move. However, if you're already on probation and you're choosing to nearly murder someone, a mother and her kid, I feel like we should be throwing those people in jail and spending the resources to change people's lives before they get to that point. This kid is too far gone. He's not going to suddenly change his tune because we're throwing him in summer camp. We have to put people like that behind bars so they don't continue to terrorize communities. And just Gascon comes out with one of his statements to Fox News Digital saying, well, the baby was fine in all this. Yeah, by the grace of God, as you point out, but also this mother is now going to suffer PTSD as a result of this. Every single time she's walking with her kid down a street and a car comes by, imagine how she's going to feel, because this is completely random for her. What about the victims? We continuously ignore the victims in this country. And it seems to me that we need to be fighting for them, not for their would-be murderers.
Wow. It's a lot of good questions that you ask. How can the grace for one mom and her baby suddenly become advantageous for a would-be killer? That's a central core question.